Chapter 3. The rope of the rowboat was unfastened, and Donald MacDonald rowed it swiftly through the moonshine. The passing of a cloud dusked the shore, but they saw him throw a rope for the guiding of the boat alongside the ledge of the landing place. Then the sudden darkening obscured their vision. Donald must be talking, they thought. 2 or 3 minutes elapsed without a sign, but at last the boat put off again, and with 2 figures coming only. Doubtless, poor Donald had had to argue against the coming of both Marcus and Gloom. In truth, this is what Donald had tried to do. But while he was speaking, Marcus was staring fixedly towards the fishing boat.
Who is there in the stern?
No one.
I thought I saw the shadow of a man. I see a man's death there in the boat.
The next moment, a heavy muffler was round Donald's mouth, and before he could resist or even guess what had happened, he was face down on the shore, bound and gagged. A minute later, Gloom took the oars of the rowboat, and they moved out of the inner harbour. As it drew near the fishing vessel, Manus stared at it intently. That is not Donald that is rowing, Ollie. No, it be Gloom McCanner. MacCodrum started. The other figure at the stern was too big for Donald. The cloud passed just as the boat came alongside. The rope was made secure, and Marcus and Gloom sprang on board. "Where is Donald MacDonald?" Manus demanded.
He has gone up the hill with a message for Anne, said Gloom.
"And what be that message?"
"That Manus MacCodrum has sailed away from Ellenmore and will never see her again."
MacCodrum laughed. A low, ugly laugh.
"Sure, Gloom McCanner, you should be taking that fidon of yours and playing for the crabs, for I'm thinking the crabs are gathering about the rocks below us and laughing with their claws."
Marcus replied then.
"Let us be having no more words, Manus MacCodrum. Anne is not for you. Gloom is to be her man, so get you hence. Go if you are wise. If not, 'tis your own death you will be making."
There was a flash as of summer lightning. A bluish flang sprang through the moonshine. Marcus reeled back with a gasping cry. His face blanched, his knees gave way. The long knife which Manus had held at him had not penetrated his breast more than an inch at most, but as he fell on the deck, it was driven into him up to the hilt. In the silence that followed, the 3 men could hear a sound like the ebb tide in seaweed. White foam bubbles began to burst from Marcus's blue lips.
"It is murder,"
said Gloom. "You have said one part of a true word, Gloom McCanner.
It is murder that you and he came for, said Manus. The death of Marcus is on you, Manus MacCodrum. Gloom looked for the rowboat that trailed behind the fishing vessel. He was at the mercy of the two men. I will go in peace, he said quietly. I was the answer, equally quietly. The two men faced each other. Gloom Arcana broke the silence at last. You'll hear the Dan-Nan-Ron the night before you die, Manus MacCodrum. And lest you doubt it, you'll hear it again in your death hour. If that be ordained, spoke Manus gravely, so be it. His very calm boded ill. Gloom knew that. There was no hope of clemency. He laughed scornfully, then pointing with his right hand, as if to someone behind his two adversaries, he cried out, "Put the death hand on them, Marcus! Give them the grave!" Manus and Ollie sprang aside, the heart of each nigh unbursting. The death touch of the newly slain is an awful thing to incur, for it means that evil may be transferred to the person touched. Next moment there was a heavy splash. Gloom had escaped. With feverish haste, Manus hauled in the rowboat, leapt into it, and began at once to row so as to intercept his enemy. Gloom dived. In a flash, Manus knew that Gloom was going to rise under the boat, seize the keel, and upset him, and thus seize him from above. Manus leapt, and indeed, scarce had he plunged into the sea ere the boat swung right over, Gloom clambering over it in the next moment. At first, Gloom could not see where his foe was. He crouched on the upturned deck and peered eagerly into the moonlight water. All at once, a black mass shot out of the shadow. This black mass laughed, the same low, ugly laugh that had preceded the death of Marcus. Gloom knew that to stay where he was meant certain death. He gathered himself together like a crouching cat. Manus was treading water slowly, but with a hook ready to strike in his right hand. Now and again he laughed. Then, in his low, sweet voice, he began to sing. The tide was dark and heavy with the burden that it bore. I heard it talking whisperily upon the weedy shore. Each wave that stirred the seaweed was like a closing door. 'Tis closing doors they hear at last, who hear no more, no more. My grief, no more. The glittering shine was upon the water of the harbour, and moved in waving lines of fire along the stone ledges. Sometimes a fish rose and split a ripple of pale gold. The man in the water stopped his treading and listened intently. Light gleamed about his slow-moving shoulders. Then a louder changing voice sang again.
'Tis closing doors they hear at last, who hear no more, no more. My grief, no more. Yes, Manus's quick ears had caught the inland strain of a voice he knew. Soft and white as the moonshine came Anne singing as she passed along the footpath leading to the harbour. In vain his wandering gaze sought her out, but she was still in shadow. When he looked back towards the rowboat, a stifled exclamation left his lips. There was not a sign of Gloom O'Connor. He'd slipped noiselessly from the boat and was either behind it or had dived beneath it, or he was swimming underwater this way or that. If only the cloud would sail by, muttered Manus, as he held himself in readiness for an attack from beneath or behind. The dusk lightened suddenly, and Manus swam slowly towards the boat, then swiftly round it. There was no one there.